So my name's Julie Ward. I'm a plant-based nutritionist, and I'm extremely happy to be here with you all. So what we're going to talk about today is pretty much plant-based nutrition and depression. It's my actual story. Do you guys all have a picture like this? Or have you seen a picture like this of yourself smiling ear to ear? Your child, your niece, your nephew? Yes? Cherish it. It's extremely important. My smile was lost very soon. So in about a year, same year, this is me growing up, sad, just really lonely, just extremely moody, just a really sad kid. And I ran into a woman from church. To tell you how sad I was, my family would go to church every Sunday. I would go to Sunday school. My parents would go to the sanctuary. And I would promptly check in at Sunday school and then actually leave and roam the halls of the church. I did not get along well with kids. I did not socialize well. I was always the kid that was just very kept to myself. So I did this probably for about 7 years, just kind of roaming the halls, avoiding people as they'd come by. One time, there was a woman by the name of Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Brown came by and she said, "Hey, do you want to sit in the office with me?" So she handled the financial office where all the ushers and everything would come in for the church. I'd sit in, and I sat with her just as quiet as a mouse. I didn't want her to tell my parents that I was ditching Sunday school, right? So sometimes I'd read. The thing is, I actually did not remember this story until I graduated from college. I ran into Miss Brown again after I traveled around Africa. I was doing an art show. She came up to me, and she was with my father. My father said, "Do you remember Miss Brown from church?" I said, "No, I don't remember her." And she looked heartbroken. She was like, "You really don't remember me?" I said, "No." She then proceeded to tell me, "When you were young, you would come and sit in my office every Sunday. You were such a sad child, and I was so worried about you." And I had put that memory and tucked it away. And then I was immediately heartbroken. And the minute she told me that, I was like, oh my God, I do remember that. And all of those feelings, all of that sadness, all of that came back up. And now it's actually part of my story, and it's very true. That is actually the year I learned how to hide and how to avoid people. So this is me from pretty much middle school all the way to high school. I developed what I call a half smile. So it's a smile that kind of masks how I really truly feel. I felt alone. I felt like I was in the wrong place, wrong people, wrong planet, just didn't get along with anyone. And that picture of me with braces, glasses, I've also been 5'11" since I was about 12. So my last name is Ward, and I'm the tallest one in the class. So I was always at the end of the line, which also didn't help for my self-esteem. But this is me, and it began to develop. But this is what I saw when I looked in the picture, in the mirror. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw this. This is how I actually felt: scared, alone, terrified, and truly wondering when it would end. There were many days that I thought about suicide, and I had to be from 7 to 12. One of the reasons, and as I got older, this is the mask that became permanent. That's my high school graduation picture, that half smile. Now, there were days of happiness, there were moments of happiness, but ultimately, even then, I really thought about dying. You know, why am I here? What's my purpose? Why do I want to stay? It was very difficult growing up. The reason I didn't probably had twofold. Had a lot to do with my church upbringing, and that I knew that if I killed myself and committed suicide, I would go to hell. And that was just the way I was taught. The other one was my mother. I knew that if I killed myself, my mother would probably be right behind me. And I didn't want to break her heart, so I stayed. Kind of glad I did. But at that point, I detached. So I knew I had to be here, and I totally detached from people. People are poison. That was what constantly went through my mind. When I went in high school, this was the quote that got me. This is a quote from Macbeth. It says, "Life is a walking shadow, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury signifying nothing." Very kind of pessimistic, but when I read it, I was like, oh my God, somebody else understands. Half the time, it's not just sadness or you just feel terrible. It's like somebody gets it. Somebody understands who you are and what you're feeling. That quote is always right next to this quote, the Serenity Prayer. And it says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." So I took those quotes with me to college, and I got through 4 years of school. So when we talk about depression, often people think, oh, they're just always sad, they're always crying, they're always just disengaged. It is low moods of sadness or weeks of sadness. It's also diminished interest in activities that used to be pleasurable. There were things that you used to like to do you don't want to do anymore. You can't focus, loss of focus. You're not getting things done, and reoccurring thoughts of suicide. Again, a lot of that's going on the inside. That's not always what people see. People saw my half smile, but all of this was happening on the inside. General causes of depression could be a variety of things. Biological, brain chemistry can be off, hormonal, nutrition. Genetics, psychology, environmental, what's going on around us can play a big part in creating sadness and depression. For me, that same picture, and honestly, this is the only picture I could find of myself with braces and glasses. So obviously, I hid from people taking pictures of me, and the joke is either I hid or my family didn't want to take pictures of me looking like this anymore. Who knows? One or the other, right? So, but I was bullied, which is why I didn't get along with kids. The other one for our family, I also believe, is genetics. I come from a family, I've heard my mother talk about depression, I've heard my grandfather talk about depression. And I had a nephew about 2 years ago who's no longer with us. So, and the official cause of his death is death by accidental gunshot wound at his own hand. And when I talk about him, beautiful young man, quite brilliant, quite bright, and when I often talk about him, I get really choked up because I've lived through a lot of what he's gone through. I didn't know that he was going through a lot of this. But I wish I could have told him to hang on because you can change your personality. There are things that you can do to change who you are. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Joe Dispenza. He really goes through identifying and giving a definition to personality. And so if you have a strong emotional reaction to something, it creates an emotional charge. And it creates an emotional charge in your brain that then sets in a memory, okay? So now we have a tendency, we're thinking within that circuitry of that experience, and we're feeling into the boundaries of that emotion. So we've done two things. We've locked that emotional charge into our brain and into our body. So say something happens in your life and you have a mood, right? Or something you're like, oh, I hate that. It's terrible. It's, I just lost my job, or, something's going on. You have a strong emotional charge. If you can't shake it, and it lasts anywhere from an hour to 48 hours, it becomes a mood. If that same emotional charge lasts longer, for weeks or a couple of weeks, it then becomes a temperament. If that emotional charge lasts for years on end, it becomes a personality. So with all my passivity and self-criticism and self-reproach and low self-esteem and all of these things that were going on in my mind, I created a depressive personality. That was my college graduation. That should have been a really wonderful day. It was a terrible day. It was a really, really rough day. But can you notice anything else about that slide? Everybody's got the same half smile, right? And I didn't realize that until I put the slides together and began to go through. I was like, oh my God, we all have the same smile. Again, going back to kind of the genetics, environmental experience, that's my mom and dad. Rough day for us all, okay? So when we talk about statistics, does anyone know, and it's up there, you can read it, but the number one cause of death for people ages 10 to 34, and this is according to the World Health Organization, is suicide. So when you think about kids, and I still think a 20-something-year-old is a kid, a 30-something-year-old is still very young. But to be able to want to kill yourself, the number one cause of death was suicide, 10 to 34. The number 4 cause of death is also suicide for ages 35 to 54. The thing I thought was also very interesting about this was economic losses are about $1 trillion globally according to depression, based on loss of productivity, apathy, not ability to focus, not getting your work done. So the traditional definition of depression has been serotonin deficit in your brain. And that means that we have an enzyme called monoamine oxidase that balances your enzymes in your brain. And it's eating too much serotonin. So the reality is too much serotonin could also make you schizophrenic. So there has to be a balance maintained. And so that treatment of serotonin deficiency is when you'll have your MAO inhibitors, your SSRs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But the new research is coming out, which I love, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years, is that serotonin is actually produced in your gut. So 90 to 95% of the serotonin is actually produced in your gut. It's a hormone. And serotonin is stimulated. So what it is serotonin is stimulated. We have nerve endings, and the main nerve is the vagus nerve, which we'll talk about later. It goes from your brain down through your gut, down to your intestines. It also attaches to your lungs, it attaches to your heart, it attaches to your internal organs. Lining your gastrointestinal tract are these nerve endings, and they're called intrachromaffin cells. So we're getting into a little bit of science because I like a little bit of science, right? And those cells produce serotonin or help produce serotonin. There's 3 ways they do it. Sugar. You ever eat sugar candy and you're like, yes, I'm ready to go? Okay, and that's glucose, and that's exactly what it does. It will produce some serotonin. Of course, you have sugar blues probably about 5 minutes after that. It falls. The other way is fiber. So there's a mechanical stimulation that happens through your gut. Fiber has a tendency to move through your gut quicker and helps these cells produce serotonin. The third way is the action of your gut microbes. So we have gut microbes in our gut, which also protect our gut lining from bad bacteria and toxins. They also limit inflammation, and they help produce serotonin. So an abnormal serotonin production can be associated with gastrointestinal conditions, IBS, constipation. For me, it was constipation as a kid, very badly, and diverticulitis disease. So there was a study done by the Alimentary Pharmacological Therapeutics, and this was done in 2016. And what they did was they just took a study and they separated 2 groups of people. A group of people that had IBS and a group of people that had depression. And they followed them for about a year. And what they saw was that the group of people that had IBS within that year were significantly more likely to get depression than someone else that did not have IBS. And that the people that had depression were significantly likely to get IBS. So they were beginning to show the link between IBS and depression, which made me really happy. So all the things that I began to know intuitively as a kid, seriously, I went to the bathroom maybe once every 8 days, maybe once every 10 days as a child. It was really bad. And part of that was my anxiety and my depression. I just would tighten up as a kid. So my father, in all of his wisdom, said, well, I'm going to give you some mineral oil. And I don't know if you guys have had mineral oil. As I get older, it does not bother me now. But as I was 10, it was like, oh, my God, this is terrible. But his comment was, it's like, look, if you don't take this, and he would give me 2 tablespoons at night before I would go to bed. If you don't take this, I'm going to have to take you to the hospital, and they're going to take it out with forceps. Now, I was like, I'll take the mineral oil, right? And that's exactly what I did. But the research is now starting to catch up with what I felt as a kid. And I'm excited about that. And one of the ways we talk about that, so when we talk about how is this possible, how is the bidirectional conversation going on between my gut and my brain? It's something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the largest nerve within the body. And think about vagabond, wanderer. It wanders all throughout our body. Hits the cerebellum at the base of our brain, goes all the way down to the base of our intestine. And it communicates with our gut. It's also been known now, when we talk about inflammation, it's being discovered that the vagus nerve is how we make the inflammation markers come up and down and they travel through the vagus nerve. So gut microbes that are out of balance can cause low-grade inflammation. So that can happen a variety of ways. We'll talk about that in just a second. But low-grade inflammation can become chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation can then cause disease. So we're talking type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all of these diseases that can come over time, including depression. Depression is a sign of chronic inflammation. Okay. Causes of gut inflammation. Again, there are a variety. I'm going to focus on 2. The food we eat. One high-fat meal can cause low-grade inflammation. So high-fat meal, the burger, the French fries. I don't eat burgers, but I do like a good, veggie burger, and it would be fried often, and I eat French fries. French fries were something that I ate all the time from time to time. And they're regular, but if you're doing it every day, people that are eating McDonald's, people that are going to Burger King, people that are constantly eating those high-fat We just talked about omega-6s, those high-fat omega-6s over time. It can cause major inflammation. Stress is another one that can cause major prolonged psychological stress, can activate the same pro-inflammatory markers as food. Okay, so you want to watch your stress. You just had a whole conversation about stress and how to change your stress, and it's pretty much the same also for depression. So let's just do a real recap of psychology in the gut. There is a definite association between your gut microbes, your digestive system, and your mental well-being. It has been shown that poor diet is a risk for depression, puts you at a risk for depression. Gastrointestinal disorders can be a precursor to depression. And there are also, an anti-inflammatory diet may help depression. So we're going to get into those foods that can make you happy. We're talking about happy foods. They are foods that you can eat to actually increase your happiness. One of the things, though, to avoid first is arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid is one of those things that is found very highly in chicken and eggs. I have clients that have worked with me, and I've put them in my 6-week program, and she came in with, Nancy, she had arthritis, and she came to me because her doctor wanted to put her on statins for cholesterol, and she was already on something for high blood pressure, and she was already on something else. She didn't want to continue to go down that path. The very first thing I had her do was give up eggs. We got off the phone, and she said, oh my God, she sent me a text. She said, I forgot to tell you. And this is week 2. I don't have any arthritic pain. She said, it's gone down, and all we did was stop. I mean, we're doing plant-based altogether, but we really stopped her eggs, and we stopped her chicken. And I've heard that time and time again. Even in my own experience, I've been plant-based for a very long time. But the other day, probably about 3 weeks ago, I thought the piece of cake I was eating was vegan. It was not. It had eggs in it. And it didn't have any dairy, but it had eggs in it. The very next day, I had joint pain in my knees, which was always kind of my sore spot. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I didn't run miles. What happened? And I went back and looked at the ingredients, and it had eggs in it. So now that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So when we talk about the foods, though, and the science behind it, dietary fiber has been associated with less depressive symptoms. There was a study that was done in 2008, and it was published in the Nutrition Journal. And they just simply did by survey. What they found was that the total intakes of fiber, vegetable fiber, and fruit fiber had, in other words, inversely associated with depression. So it's possible that these fibers, again, we're talking about the intrachromaffin cells and fiber moving through your digestion. And fiber definitely has an impact on depression. Natural mood foods, the action of polyphenols. Polyphenols are those things found in colorful fruits, in teas, spices, and blueberries or blackberries, high in polyphenols, high in phytonutrients. This particular study done in nutritional neuroscience found that the polyphenols have high antioxidant, high anti-inflammatories properties that actually help with brain cognition and brain functioning. Vegans report less stress and anxiety than omnivores. So this was done, same nutritional neuroscience. This study was published in 2015. And basically, they did research, and this was, I think this was a literature review. And they just saw that a strict plant-based diet does not negatively affect your mood, and that reducing your animal intake can actually have mood benefits. So this is my story as I graduate. This is me. So that day wasn't so bad. This is me with a smile. I actually have my degree. I gave up meat on that day or that week. 1987 is when I graduated from college. I remember walking across the street. I was in Atlanta. My last cheeseburger, and it was a Burger King cheeseburger, and I remember enjoying it, having it, being done with it, and that was it. So Burger King in Geneva, no? McDonald's, similar, yeah, similar. Carl's Jr., burger, flat charbroiled burger, whatever that is, your fast food. I walked across the street, ate it, loved it, and I was done with meat. I never went back to having meat again. And honestly, I did that because, one, I couldn't poop. I wasn't feeling good. I wanted to feel better. I wanted to feel lighter. I just wanted to have a different life every day when I got up and how I felt. I gave up chicken in 1992. This has been a gradual process. It wasn't all at once. And I gave up fish in 2008. So this has been my journey. And I gave up fish just because I live in California on the Pacific side of things, and our fish is not that clean. I normally make whole fish, and I'll cut it into bits, and I'll make a fish stew. And I got down to the last piece of fish, and I bit into it, and I like to suck the bones and, just really eat the fish, right? So there was a tumor on the bone that was about half the size of my thumb. And that's the face I made too. I was like, oh my God, and I just ate the whole fish. So you don't, and then I did a little more research on fish, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time too. But I found that you don't always know where your fish is coming from, what it looks like before it gets to your plate since they filleted it. So I was like, okay, I'm done. So happy foods. Now we're talking about the happy foods. There are definitely foods that you can eat to make you happier. If you knew what foods to eat to make you happier, would you? Yeah? How many? Show of hands. Yes? Okay. Just, some people want to stay where they are. It's not. So this was published in the World Journal of Psychiatry in 2018. They came up with a list of antidepressant foods. And what they did was they studied 34 nutrients that the body uses for human development. Out of those 34 nutrients, 12 of them actually had antidepressant benefits. And these are them. So, I forgot you could see it. Wait, I want to ask you a question. Yeah, right? What food, and if you've already seen it, don't say anything. What do you think is the number one food to make you happy? Chocolate? Of course, chocolate. We're in Geneva, we're in Switzerland, Geneva. What else? Cacao, chocolate. So I couldn't hear it. Anybody else? Fruits, berries, okay. Good, you guys didn't see it. Watercress. 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 I can't say it enough. So watercress. So first of all, the 12 nutrients were folate, B12, B6, B1, thiamine, Fe, iron, your omega-3s, EPA, DHA, magnesium, potassium, selenium, vitamin A, vitamin C, and zinc. Watercress has 127% of all those nutrients. So, a lot. There's also another list that I put together. It's got 41 fruits and vegetables that also they're nutrient dense and have the same properties. And I'm willing to pass it out. I have a mailing list at the back if you'd like to sign that. You can also get in touch with me. You'll have my slides at the end. If you want that list, I'll be more than happy to email it to you. But this list in my class, the very first thing that I do with my clients when they come in is we go through a green smoothie. And this is my module 1, pretty much is here today. No eggs, no chicken. And our green smoothie has everything in it. Watercress, everything that's highlighted. Watercress, spinach, mustards, the fresh herbs. We do parsley and cilantro. Chicory greens. If you can't find chicory, dandelion works great. I'm a proponent of dandelion. Dandelion's beautiful. And then to fill up your blender, I've got a Vitamix. It's about this tall. I pack it in. We've got 64 ounces of green juice to drink throughout the day, at least 32, and then you could drink another 32 tomorrow, the next day. But this is it. This is day 1. Now that's the thing I wanted to say, we don't put fruit in it. So you have to get used to just drinking your greens. You got to get used to drinking your salad, right? The only fruit I will let people put in it is Granny Smith apple or a cup full of berries. That's it. And this is it. I had another client. She said, can I stay on the smoothie fast for another week? I was like, sure. So we did it for a week already. She's like, I just feel so good. People at my job are like, oh my God, what are you on? And she used to drink 4 cups of coffee and every day just to get through the day. She was drinking this. Now the other thing that's in here, and those of you that are writing, I'll tell you, is a tea mix. So it's a rooibos tea, a lemon balm. It's rooibos lemon balm, and then we would do, and ginkgo. Rooibos lemon balm and ginkgo was one version of it, and we would add it to this. The other version of that, to boost your immune system, was elderberry, rose hips, and nettles. So we'd make a tea of that and add it to this green smoothie. And you would be amazed, because we still have all the fiber in there, by lunchtime, you're still full. Okay, and your energy is there. There's no 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock tank. There are also foods that actually naturally inhibit MAO. So these are your berries, your grapes, your onions, your green teas. These are the phytonutrients, spices. Anybody love saffron like I love saffron? Saffron, and when you eat saffron, do you just feel a little better? Do you ever notice that? I do, and I make a saffron quinoa. It's like, wow, wow. Okay. So this is a quote that I love, and this is by the Lancet Journal of Psychiatry, and it states, although the determinants of mental health are complex, the emerging and compelling evidence for nutrition as a crucial factor in the high prevalence and incidence of mental disorders suggests the diet is as important to psychiatry as it is to cardiology, endocrinology, and gastroenterology. So again, the connection between diet, gut, brain is new. It is going to continuously be studied over the next 10 to 20 years, and I, for one, am extremely excited. In terms of making changes, these are the things that I've had to do in addition to changing my diet over the course of my life. I've invested in my health. If you know anyone that is depressed or has an acute depressive situation going on, immediately get help, first of all. Get help. Take whatever pill they're going to give you to stay grounded, to stay planted. I'm going to say that immediately. The next thing is going to be work on your diet. Gratitude. Get up in the morning. 5 things you're happy for. It changes your brain chemistry. Same thing with meditation. These are the things that I did over and over again. I get up throughout the day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy is a choice. Happy is also a state of mind. Choose to be happy. And changing your thought patterns. You can't have a positive life with a negative mind. So once you begin to do into gratitude and change things, thoughts also change. And then nature. That's me in the redwoods. I can't get enough of going outside, touching the trees, being grounded. It's all, this is it. And that's me now. My story now. I'm happy. I'm back to the smile that I started with. I have moments of sadness just like we all do, but they don't stick. Joe Dispenza's concept, the definition of personality runs in my head. Okay, it just doesn't feel good. I don't want to stay here. I know what feeling good feels like. I want to stay there. And that's what I do. It's doable. I'm still here. I just wish I could have grabbed my nephew before he went over the other side.